So you had yesterday's response to the J&J news. That stock up a little bit, perhaps less onerous than anticipated in terms of the fine. But what does this reported Purdue Pharma settlement, the magnitude of it, say about the industry's liability, those other publicly traded companies perhaps that have exposure?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's what's on investors' minds right now. I think when you look at Purdue Pharma, it's important to think about them as one of the companies that has the most exposure to opioid prescriptions, especially relative to companies like Johnson & Johnson, where it looks like less than 1% of their prescriptions were part of the opioid sales at the peak and through the different years. So I think when looking at this very large sum, I think it's something that's much more important for the firms that have a lot of exposure, like a Purdue Pharma, and less. I don't think you can extrapolate that huge amount into what something like a J&J would pay.
The timing, Damien, the fact that we had this J&J settlement in Oklahoma yesterday, now we have this report regarding Purdue and these settlement talks today. Is there anything to be gamed out there in terms of how investors should be thinking about more clarity and also just maybe the magnitude of these resolutions?
Yeah, I think it's difficult to judge the exact magnitude. I'd say with certain companies, they're going to have more exposure than others. With a company like J&J, this is a company with very little exposure. We've modeled in close to $1 billion in costs around the litigation for the opioid cases. And I think that's realistic, and I think that might be within the ballpark of where they end up with this whole process. I think when we see the case coming out of Oklahoma that was over $500 million, I think, even though the market was happy with that, I still think that's a very high number. And if you extrapolate that to all the cases in the U.S., you're going to end up with a very large number. So I think what's likely is this case in Oklahoma gets appealed. And I think we will see some settlements over a long period of time that will make this whole process go away. But I think it's going to take time. But I also think it's not going to be as bad as what the Oklahoma case says and what the recent announcement that Purdue made just a few minutes ago.
Yeah, also some talk of perhaps a global settlement that the industry might participate in. Damien, we got to leave it there, but thank you very much for your time today.
Great. Thank you.